Welcome everyone to WMVL Writer's Block. This is our second episode. Today we have a very special guest, Gabrielle and Welie, and very excited to have you here today. How are you feeling?
Hi, I'm feeling good. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling pretty. I'm feeling very prepared, I guess. But
I don't feel prepared. Let's see how it goes.
so why don't we start off by hearing a little bit about yourself? I understand you're from Dominican Republic.
Yeah, I still am from Dominican Republic. I lived there for 18 years before moving here. I was born in the capital city. It's called Santo Domingo, and yeah.
Very nice. And do you feel like your origins have a big influence on your writing, or do you feel like
I feel like they do, and I am very conscious about all sorts of origins, like my grandparents and all that stuff. So I feel like all of that influences in one way or another.
okay, very interesting. So, with your two pieces today, do you see any influence, any of that influence sort of in these pieces, or?
Yeah, maybe these two pieces, not that much in particular, but usually with my writing, I've been trying to write stuff that sounds like Dominican in some way. Because if you read Latin American authors, you'll usually get vocab and stuff like that just sounds like a certain country, and I feel like we don't have that much of it.
Okay.
So I've been trying to work on that. But these two pieces are more of I guess my Americanized version.
All right. Okay, so how about we start off with The Art of Madness? Would you like to read the whole thing, or just a segment of it?
If you want, I can read the whole thing. I don't mind.
All right, let's hear the whole thing.
Okay. The Art of Madness. Amelia closed her eyes and submerged herself in the bathtub. The surplus water crashed, but she couldn't hear a thing. It wasn't her fault. She screamed, confident in the fact that the water would muffle the sound, and it did, for no one came banging on the door. Nobody was yelling and calling her crazy, but they just kept eating dinner downstairs, buying the story of her headache so full-heartedly that she pitied them. It was right around this time of the year that she had begun understanding once again, as if the knowledge had left her for a whole 11 months, that she had the ability to drive herself mad, if she only tried hard enough. It could be anything, really. She had perfected the art of insanity over time. She prided herself with the idea that she was able to control it and feed it to herself in dosages that she could handle. She would lecture herself on the steps to follow. She was careful, though, and did so quietly and only when everyone else was asleep. With the mirror in front of her, she would look at herself fiercely in the eye and say, "Let it be known that if I shall not make it out from this one, it was intentional. But if I return safely, it was also intentional." It was comical, she knew, the atrocity of the rhythm and the repetition of the word intentional. But she refused to let the rest of the lecture go to waste because of her inability to confecture proper introductions. We must start with simple things. Problems, as many of you probably know, are most of the time only projections. Therefore, we must project our deepest insecurities and questioning of greater meaning onto the simplest of situations. Every conversation, every glance, every gesture, and every action should be scrutinized until our heads can no longer comprehend their literal meaning. She loved feeling scholarly. Her only reason for living was her eternal hunger for knowledge. She wanted to understand. She'd take any answer, just as long as there was one. "Sweetie, are you okay?" Her mother knocked hurriedly on the door. Amelia returned to the surface in a jolt of panic. "Yeah, I'm fine." Her mother didn't reply. She had probably already left. It was always like that with her mother. She was always rushed and never had time for her. Oh, what a lame and overused tragedy. She needed to do better than that. Her mother was probably having an affair. That's why she was in such a hurry all the time. Amelia was so crazy she would actually think such a thing of her mother. She was crazy because she felt neglected, and she made up stories about her mother to cover up the reality of the situation. Her mother didn't love her. She just did things she did out of responsibility. But how could she be thinking all of these things? She couldn't believe, but of course she did, that she would have the audacity to make her brain run in circles in that way. But it was so simple, and it isn't art if it isn't at the beginner's level. She had to master it. So she remembered the reason why she was upset that day to begin with. Before the tub and the screaming, it was Peter, like always, calling her to remind her that he still loved her, even if he had cheated on her. After the first 3 calls, Amelia was certain that he just wanted to remind her he cheated. It wasn't okay. It hadn't been okay when he had only cheated with one girl, and it certainly wasn't okay now that she knew that there was a party of two or more involved. That's when she decided to use Peter and his fallacy to fuel her insanity. It was that time of the year, she just knew. It was November, right before Christmas, enough time to go mad for a while and return to the surface to appreciate family and the coming of the new year. Maybe it had more to do with losing. Maybe she needed to lose it all and lose sight of everything before she could finally be thankful for it all. It was a human condition, lunacy, she was sure. She was convinced that everyone practiced a similar ritual. For some it was binge eating, for others it was starving or dieting or throwing up. For some it was drinking, and for others chain smoking. Some people would just cheat or do anything stupid just to cause a ruckus. It was a matter of breaking the peace, of extinguishing happiness, just to reconquer it all over again. But she couldn't lend herself to any of those vices, and so she drowned herself in knowledge every year. She would let her brain absorb every fact and figure around her, and then she set it aflame with a simple question mark. That was all there had ever been to it. Question upon question spread across the board until sanity was driven out of the picture. She confused herself with philosophy while examining her reflection. She would condemn herself because of her irrevocable imperfection. This is why she filled the tub with water, and she tried to drown, because she knew it was humanly impossible. It was for theatrical purposes, nothing to do with the actual outcome of suicide. There was nothing to gain from it. It was game over. Once her body had wrinkled enough, she stood up erect and spread her arms like Jesus. She joined her hands together, her arms against her bare breast, and she prayed for the salvation of her soul, for she knew that what she was doing to her mind. She made it clear that she intended to come back, afloat, and mend herself to become stronger than before. She needed to get Peter out of her system. She dried herself up, and while wearing her bathrobe, perched herself on her bed. She liked letting the breeze dry her up and smooth her out. She closed her eyes and fell asleep, confident in the fact that this episode would seem and sound like a headache in the morning. In the end, that was all she ever remembered.
Very nice. So that was the Art of Madness, and there were a lot of binaries that I like in this story. You've got you're comparing her addiction to her own melancholy to that of alcoholism. And it reminds me a lot of Freud's Beyond the Pleasure Principle. Basically, one of the anecdotes in this story is like, in his story at least, is there's this kid who will, in Freud's estimation, he's sort of upset with his parents leaving him every day. So he takes out the same sort of knowledge, the same sort of actions on his toys. Like he'll throw them over the bed and lose them just so he can find them again. So, and he's like upset that his father has left for the war. So when he wants to punish one of his toys, he like throws it out there. He's like, "Go to the front."
That's really sad.
Yeah. So I was getting a lot of the same thing out of this character Amelia. She keeps like reliving her troubles with Peter, just so she can resolve them. Is that sort of what you were getting at?
Actually, like, when I started writing this piece, it was around, like, November, and, I was also taking, Professor's Writing American Poets class,
Mm-hmm.
and I was writing my paper on Sylvia Plath,
Mm-hmm.
so a lot of the things that Sylvia Plath talks about is, like, the art of dying, so I made this, like, the art of madness, and it was mostly about, like, because I feel like Sylvia Plath is like some sort of extreme. Like feeling suicidal is an extreme,
Oh,
but
absolutely.
there is like a middle ground between like maybe being sane and just like being a little mad.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. Like I also thought that maybe that's sort of like what angsty teenagers go through sometimes. Like they're just a little. They're trying to like madden themselves. I don't know.
So do you view this, like her feeding herself madness, as sort of a defense mechanism for the real world? Like,
In a way, yeah, that it reads that way, and also, um, like it's like out of boredom too. Like just like there's nothing really happening in her life, and like the way to make up for it is like trying to like over exaggerate these little things.
well, I'd say her boyfriend cheating on her with like
Yeah, I guess that's the
multiple
big thing. Yeah.
partners, that's a pretty big. But another thing, you said you had written this around November. Um, Around between Thanksgiving and Christmas time is actually the time of year that most people who commit suicide choose to carry it out. So
Yeah.
do you think um, Do you think that like factored into this at all? Like